doesn't care about you. That's why you need a medical emergency kit. It contains life-saving medications like ivermectin, Z-Pak, and antibiotics. Stock them before they block them.
Record investment in our military. We've never spent so much, and we've never spent it more wisely, because now we watch it. We spend it properly. I'm also supporting an across-the-board pay raise for every sailor and service member in the United States Armed Forces. Now, if you don't want it, you want to give back to your country, just let us know. We won't give it to you. Is there anybody in that category? One thing was clear, that no enemy will ever even dream of threatening America's Navy. There's no Navy even close, not even close. You hear about some of them doing ships, but nobody can do what we do. Nobody has what we have. And we also have the best equipment that rides along in those ships. You see that. Nobody makes equipment like we do. Nobody makes the ammunition, the weapons, the missiles, the planes, none of it. And if they do, the American sailor stands ready to crush them and sink them and wreck them and blast them into oblivion, right? We have
some anecdotes about behind the scenes. That one of the most important moments was the NATO summit in Brussels in 2018. You write, "This might be the meeting at which NATO is ruined, I thought, and it's happening on my watch. The alliance had managed to operate successfully for 70 years, but not after 12th of July 2018, which was this summit." So this was because Trump said, unless you put up this amount of money, I'm walking out. Just tell us how chilled you felt. What was everybody feeling at that summit right now? A lot has been written about it, but it's interesting to hear.
No, we were extremely concerned because we actually feared that President Trump was going to leave the whole meeting, and they had packed their luggages and ready to leave. And he stated that if you don't promise to pay more now, immediately, I will leave, and you need NATO more than I do. We had a kind of emergency.
Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, a unique combination of an elegant diplomat and a bully. And you also write that he insulted you at one point in a meeting. "Why am I even sitting here?" he said. "You have no opinions of your own, Stoltenberg. You say only what your bosses permit you to say." How shocking was that?
It was not very shocking, but because that had been more or less his style for a long time.
That's exactly. Those were Ronald Reagan's words. We didn't fix it. We didn't do AI. Those are Ronald Reagan's words. And I'm sure Ronald Reagan right now is spinning around in his grave thinking the turmoil that President Trump has created, not just between Canada and the U.S., the two closest allies in the world, but around the world as well. There's no reason for this. We can be stronger and wealthier and richer if we all work together. And that's why I believe in something called the AMCAN Fortress, the American-Canadian Fortress. We've been close as allies and friends for 200 years and trading partners. So let's continue. We're your friends, not your enemies. And President Trump is treating us like enemies right now.
Turkey and Slovakia that continue to buy Russian oil and gas will come up with a plan and execute a plan that weans them off of Russian oil and gas. And, Hungary, unlike many of their neighbors, has not made any plans or made any active steps. And so we're going to continue to work with them, and we're going to continue to work with their neighbors like Croatia and other countries that can help them wean themselves off. And, obviously that pipeline is most likely to be shut off in the coming years as well. And so there's a lot of planning that our friends in Hungary should do, and we're going to help them, obviously, as a good ally, make those plans and execute them to get them off of Russian oil.
We didn't have a declaration to go into Panama. Bush 41 went into Panama to replace the leadership there because the Panamanian leadership were working with drug cartels to threaten our country. Reagan didn't have a declaration of war, congressional authorization to deal with Cuban influence. So this idea of Rand Paul, I just fundamentally disagree with. To the other senators, you deserve more information and you're going to get more information. But there is no requirement for Congress to declare war before the commander-in-chief can use force. Panama and Grenada are two examples in our backyard where Republican presidents chose to go after countries and leaders that were threatening our people.
But there seem to be a number of issues wound up in here. I know you personally used to serve as a judge advocate in the Air Force. We looked at the JAG manual. Preventative self-defense employed to counter non-imminent threats is illegal under international law. So if we are not at war and these suspected criminals pose no threat of imminent violence, isn't this potentially a war crime to be killing the people on these boats and then to be taking out a leader?
No, not at all. I don't know what manual you're referring to, but I know what President Bush 41 did. He took down Ortega, the leader of Panama, because he was involved in drug trafficking, threatening our country. Venezuela is now partnering with Hezbollah. Hezbollah is running out of money because Iran is weak.
That's not new.
Partnering with drug cartels in Venezuela. No, it should have stopped. Here's what's new. You got a commander-in-chief that's not going to put up with this crap. We're not going to sit on the sidelines and watch boats full of drugs come to our country. We're going to blow them up and kill the people that want to poison America. And we're now going to expand operations, I think, to the land. So please be clear about what I'm saying today. President Donald Trump sees Venezuela and Colombia as direct threats to our country because they house narco-terrorist organizations. The leader of Venezuela is an indicted drug dealer in American courts. So, yeah, the game is changing when it comes to drug traffickers and drug cartels. We're going to use military force like we have in the past to protect our country. That's the new game we're playing, and I'm glad we're playing that game. And if I were Maduro, I'd find a way to leave before he goes.
Welcome back to the SCIF. I'm still on the ground here in Beirut, Lebanon, and have been doing a lot of meetings and source building here in country because we have the best sourcing of conservative ink anywhere in the world, and we have people on the ground. That's what we do, and you're going to get that information today, along with more in the coming weeks to months as we continue to discuss the plight of Christians in this region. And I'm in this mosquito bed again. Sorry about this, people. I'm going to move here in a second, but the other place where I usually or was wanting to do the broadcast was being occupied. So we're producing on the fly as usual when we're on the road. So please bear with us. By the way, we are on all podcast providers. We are on Gettr. We stream there. We stream on Rumble. We stream on multiple X channels. And we upload the show to YouTube afterwards. If you haven't subscribed to YouTube for us at CDM or also on the CDM1 Rumble channel, please do that. It's extremely important. We continue to grow those numbers. I want to say hello to the crew. They're getting ready in the chat already going. Multiple comments already. Love that. Really appreciate the engagement because that's what drives the show. Please tell people about the show, tell people about cdm.press and spread the word. We're getting really, really, really good feedback on our global coverage because nobody does it like us. Nobody gets on the ground and builds sources over weeks and months and over years, and then cultivates those sources. And so we get information before anyone else. I'll be on the road tonight after the meetings. We have more today, but tonight I'm heading to Montenegro and then Serbia and the Balkans. Again, hitting a lot of the Christian countries that are under siege. And so we'll be reporting from there over the next few days. And so we talked about the crew. Please check out whatfinger.com. They're our aggregator site. So they post a lot of our content. So we really want to send them traffic. And also cdm.press 3 times a day. Please check that out as your go-to source for information globally about what you really need to know. There's so much news going on right now. We're really trying to provide you what you need to know and not just what you think you may want to know. So you're going to see stuff here that you just don't get anywhere else. We're a wire service. We have people on the ground. After this show, which again is going to be about an hour and a half today, I got to cut it a little early because I got a meeting with this center that works to keep Christianity in the Middle East in multiple different countries. And so we're going to be coordinating with them about coverage and getting more information to you. So very, very thankful for all the relationships we have on the ground here, and you'll see more of that. So I want to talk about that in the second segment, exactly what we've been doing here and who we've been talking to, and we'll do that. But today is October 28th, and this is your Mission Brief. I'm your host, Todd Wood. Joel Rayburn nomination pulled over Syria. This is interesting. He's a guy that was in the State Department in the first Trump term, an envoy to this region, and he is accused, and I don't have any proof, but he's accused of, and it's reported that he's accused of in multiple areas, multiple outlets, that he was one of the ones lying to Trump in the first term about how many U.S. troops were actually here in Syria when Trump was trying to get them out. So he was already approved, gone through the Senate confirmation, and they pulled the nomination before the final vote. So that's really, really interesting, and we're digging more into that. It looks like he was kind of a neocon type, all pro that agenda, and that's why he may have been, we don't have any proof, may have been essentially concealing how many U.S. troops were in Syria to the commander-in-chief, which is, treason, simply. So we're going to try to build more information out on that. Japan and the U.S. signed a shipbuilding agreement. This is big. Shipbuilding is big. We're on it like stink on you-know-what all over in armedforces.press, our military channel, and we're going to continue to report on the build-out of shipbuilding across America as we recover and try to rebuild the republic. There's some Latin American pushback on number 3 over the war, the drug war, allegedly is what it's called, striking drug boats coming into the U.S. out of Venezuela and Colombia, and the rhetoric against those two regimes. There's pushback, and we've had sources come to us and said, you're literally creating anti-American sentiment in the region over how you're handling this. So we're not taking one side or the other. We're just reporting the news, and that's news, and we want to get it out there. Jeffrey Sachs, peace being sabotaged by Europe. We're going to play some of that here in the third and fourth segment because it's really fundamental to what's happening globally and the war in Ukraine and elsewhere as to what is driving all this. And a new Hagia Sophia in Belgrade. If you've ever been to Istanbul, you've seen the old Hagia Sophia, the Eastern Orthodox Byzantine Empire Cathedral where the kings and queens were coronated. Beautiful facility, stood there for 1,000 years. It was turned into a mosque after the Ottomans took control, and Erdogan in Turkey has made it more of an Islamic focus, and so that is the new Hagia Sophia being built in Belgrade is extremely interesting, and I'm going to be there, and we'll probably report live from it here soon. So we're going to take a break. We'll be right back. More on the SCIF coming, so stay with us. Appreciate you being here today.
Watching my friends gain more and more weight, and then eventually I got to tell you, this is a little dark, but bad diet literally killed my whole crew.
Wow.
Diabetes, a stroke, I mean, all kinds of stuff. It's like, you had a stroke? You're not even 50 years old. You guys got to quit eating this stuff. Your body knows what's what. You're not conscious of this. But that's why people will go to the refrigerator and they'll grab this and that and the other and put together this outrageously elaborate combination of foods. Your body's trying to reach balance. Unbeknownst to us, our bodies are always trying to reach homeostasis. You can't eat all of this stuff and expect to live a long time. And one thing led to another, and I went, forget this. We're going to make our own product. So we partnered with one of the world's top 3 biochemists where nutrition-specific study is concerned. I said, all I want is the best nutritional and immune support product in the world. So we mixed it in yogurt. It's a powder. I got a bag of it here. I keep one on the console all the time, just so I can show people.
Yeah.
And it's a powder. Now, this is not candy. This is hardcore nutrition. And sugar is an enemy. And most people do not know that the reason these bellies are showing up on people all over the place, your body makes fat to store the toxins it can't get rid of. So it just puts them over here. But I can tell you this, you take this for 30 days and then lay off of it for 2 or 3 days, and you'll go, good grief, give me some more. Skin, nails, hair growing back. Cut yourself and it heals in half the time.
I'm David Cross, and you may know me from my election integrity work, but I also own U.S. Asset Management, an investment advisory practice. I've been an advisor for nearly 30 years, and one of the questions I get asked most frequently is, do I have enough money relative to other people my age? And while that's an interesting question, it's also the wrong question. The right question is do you have enough money to sustain your lifestyle for the rest of your life? This is a question you should know the answer to. This is what we do. Check us out at us-am.com and look for our big proud American Eagle logo.
We have put slogging over Africa. Foot, slogging over Africa. Boot, moving up and down again. There's no discharge in the war. 7, 6, 11.
Welcome back to the SCIF here live on the ground in Beirut, Lebanon, reporting on the sustainability of Christianity. And we had some really good meetings with some officials from the Free Patriotic Movement yesterday, which is one of the largest Christian parties here in Lebanon, in Beirut, in the country. And there's some things they're fighting for, and I just want to bring you some information on that as to exactly what their agenda is. We'll be reporting on this more. But here's some of the things that they want over the next, short run in order to try and reestablish the Christian communities here in a way that is sustainable for the long term. One is they want attention to the Christian plight in Lebanon. There's all kinds of attention towards, sorry, I'm getting messages here. There's all kind of attention towards all other ethnic groups in the region, the Turks, the Israelis, everything else. But there's no attention really on the Christian plight in Lebanon. So that is important. And so they want the bully pulpit of the U.S. and other Western governments to try and talk about and put them towards the top of the list, because for decades now, this has been a problem. They want to recapture the Christian leadership framework in country, as in there used to be a real persistent Christian presence in Lebanon in the governmental structure. That was removed after the Civil War and after the Color Revolution in 2019. They want to regain some of the power structure that they've had in the past. They want return of Syrian refugees. There's 2 million Syrian refugees here that came into the country during the Assad war. And so they want to get that back, get them back in country, because they see them as a threat here demographically and also terror-wise and basically violence-wise if they decide to. They want to get them back into Syria. And they think the best way to do that is to stop funding them. And the U.S. and other people are funding that refugee problem here in Lebanon. And they'd like them to go back to their country now that the war is over. And then they want to keep Christianity vibrant in the region. This is a thousands of year old religion, 2,000 years. And this region is some of the original Christians, is where it started. Jesus walked here in Lebanon, and they want that to be retained. So that's we're going to report more on that, and we're having more meetings later today. We're in and out of meetings and putting all this together on the road. So thank you for your patience. I want to talk about some stories here. This is in Serbia. Foreign globalists use color revolutions in Albanian Islamic terror to destabilize Serbia. So this is Vučić is a pro-Christian, pro-Trump leader. This is by an article by Roger Stone. And so this is very important. Go to the Balkan.press, which is our Balkan paper. You can see this. And it goes into how that's happening in country in Serbia. But they want Vučić gone in Serbia. They want Orban gone in Hungary. They've gotten Poland with Tusk now in government. They want the guy in Slovakia removed. And so they want this Christian bastion, this masthead, this beachhead in Eastern Europe. They want that removed in part, bring it into the globalist fold. So that's why we're going to Serbia and Montenegro here to discuss and find out more for you on those different countries. This one is interesting. Japan and the U.S. are signing a shipbuilding agreement. That's important. Shipbuilding is important. By the way, we're going to put some stuff out on Ingalls Shipyard down in Mississippi in Pascagoula. Very important capability for the U.S. as far as building ships. It's been there for decades. It needs to be rebuilt and reestablished along with other people or other sites across the country. So we'll be discussing that. And this is the article on CDM.press with Rayburn's nomination being pulled due to concerns over Syria and his involvement there. You can read that on CDM. Another Balkan article. This is the Hagia Sophia, the new one in Serbia. Let me scroll down. You can see the images. Extremely beautiful. This is similar to what was built in Istanbul or Constantinople under the Byzantine Empire. Very beautiful facility. We'll be reporting live from that in Serbia in a few days. Here's one which is very important. Trump attacks on Venezuela and Colombia causing backlash in the region. That's on CDM.press. You can find it there. Very unique, important article based on our relationships in Latin America. I had a Colombian guy come to me and say, look, you need to know what's going on here. These two countries have been connected for eons, and they're connected by a mountain range, and they're very skilled at urban warfare, at jungle warfare and mountain warfare, highly trained troops, highly trained militaries. And this is not going to be a walk in the park. And you're creating anti-American sentiment with what's happening. So especially the rhetoric against the presidents. And the people in these countries don't really believe that they're head of a drug cartel, but we'll see. Again, an important story that you'll only find on CDM. So we're going to take another break. We'll be right back, and we're going to play some of Jeffrey Sachs and his thoughts on the Ukraine war. And then we've got Pete Blaber in the second hour on Ukraine SitRep. So stay with us. The bird flu is circulating. We're getting more and more press, more fear mongering, more warnings about this. First, let's start with that. What say you on?
Well, what I say is it specifically is not circulating. It's in animals. There's one human, maybe two transmissions, no human-to-human transmission. And stand by, everybody. If there is some sort of sudden human-to-human transmission, you should immediately be suspicious that gain of function was involved with that. Just the fact that they're taking an animal virus and going nuts on it in the press and talking about it all the time, that to me leads me to believe that they have concerns that somebody is doing something with that virus, because this would not happen naturally, in my opinion.
Our world is changing rapidly. Many crucial systems we depend upon are collapsing. And the most important system that is failing is the food supply.
Mr. President, this Council is more than aware of the multiple challenges and threats the world is facing today. But the threat of famine, people starving slowly to death, must be a red line.
And these food prices are going to keep going up and up, and they're going to keep feeding excuse after excuse, narrative after narrative.
Yeah.
You're going to have to get off that treadmill and start getting more autonomous with your own food growing.
You want to make sure that you can eat, because frankly, food is the biggest issue as we are going through these transitions.
But amidst the chaos, there is a path to resilience. Marjorie Wildcraft is the female leader of the survival and preparedness movement. Marjorie has taught millions of people how to grow an abundance of food in a grid-down situation, even if you have no experience, are older, or out of shape.
I've spent decades finding the fastest, easiest, and funnest ways for the average person to be able to grow a lot of food. I've created a step-by-step process that's so simple that even kids to elders have been using it in order to grow a lot of their own food. And you can too, even if you have no experience, you're older, or you're out of shape.
Growing your own food is like printing your own money. Get started today.
Welcome back to the SCIF. I want to now play a video with Jeffrey Sachs on the Ukraine conflict, and then we'll have Pete Blaber at the top of the hour. But this is really good by Jeffrey, and I wanted you to hear kind of his thoughts on what's going on with the EU and Ukraine, and then Pete and I will discuss it further with more specifics in the second hour. So here we go. I'm going to play this now.
Welcome back to the program. We are joined today by Professor Jeffrey Sachs to discuss what seems to be the last hope of a peaceful settlement in Ukraine. We see now that Putin and Trump, they will initially agreed now to have another meeting to find a peaceful settlement. Budapest was the destination they seemed to agreed upon. But the reactions from Europe seem to have been panic, and this was contrasted with the great excitement when they thought Trump may send tomahawks, which could trigger, nuclear exchange. Since then, the Hungarian foreign minister has accused the Europeans of attempting to sabotage the meeting, and the meeting has now seemingly been cancelled, and you can almost hear the champagne corks going off across European capitals. It is quite a unique situation, given that we are losing this war. How do you make sense of this situation?
Well, I think the European leaders are dreadful, and they're failing. And we can start from the point of view that the greatest warmongers of our day, Starmer of the UK, Merz of Germany, and Macron of France, have the most tenuous hold on power and political authority within their own countries. They have approval ratings of about 20% and disapproval ratings of about 80%. And that's true of all three of these warmongers. So I think we can't quite make sense of it in the in a rational sense. These are failed politicians. They have a failed approach to this crisis. And so I don't want to rationalize their failure. It also makes it a little bit hard to understand this persistence in failure. What they have been recommending actually for 3 years, more than 3 years, since Russia and Ukraine nearly reached a negotiated agreement in April 2022, is continued war that brings no solutions for any of their own objectives. Europe is economically in a growing crisis. This war and the break of economic relations with Russia has led to a significant downturn and continuing decline of the European economy. The war is a huge distraction from what Europe should be doing to try to regain some focus on technological competition with the United States and China. Instead, Europe is completely obsessed with sanctions on Russia and with fighting this war. So the economics have not played to Europe's interest. But more than that, of course, the battlefield has been devastating. Since the break off of negotiations between Russia and Ukraine in April 2022, Ukraine has lost territory, lost well over 1 million, and by some counts, roughly 2 million people to death and serious injury from this war. The demographics of people fleeing Ukraine are obvious and also devastating. Ukraine can't keep the lights on anymore throughout the country. So what is being accomplished by this continued insistence on a victory over Russia, that Ukraine will retake all ground, Russia will pay reparations, Russian assets will be seized, Russia will be brought to account, NATO will expand to Ukraine. In other words, every delusional idea which is impossible to implement continues to this day to be the view of these European leaders. And the public is having none of it because none of it works, none of it makes sense. So you ask me why, I can't tell you why, except that these are failed politicians. Okay, I'll try to rationalize a bit why. They think that, or they claim to think that it's better to fight Russia on the front line, so-called, and have the Ukrainians do it, because otherwise Russia will show up in Berlin or Paris or London. The only way Russia's showing up in these places is as tourists or possibly investors, not as troops. So the rationalization that's given, we have to stop Russia here, otherwise Russian expansionism will overtake Europe. That's a common meme, and you find it in some of the comment pages of the British newspapers and so forth. It's a nonsense. It's false. It's never put to the test through negotiations, but that seems to be the claim. Is there some hidden force of war profiteering that's part of this? I actually don't think so, that's fundamental. One might have said 3 years ago that Europe was just responding to U.S. pressures, and that seemed to be a viable way to understand Europe's warmongering. But with Trump trying to end the war one way or another, the continued European extremism on the war cannot be explained by the U.S. pressure. So I think that it is delusional, and of course, one more factor to be mentioned. Russia's frontline neighbors, the Baltic states and Poland, are, for historical reasons that one can maybe understand, although I don't agree with, are rabidly Russophobic. And there is a view in Europe, we must hold together, and so we must let our frontline eastern states dictate the European-wide policy. So there's a certain dimension of this, that this is just the way that Europe itself is holding together to let the most Russophobic voices speak. I mean, how else could one explain that Europe has turned its foreign policy machinery over to a vice president, high representative of Europe from Estonia, who is morning till night till morning vulgarly Russophobic, I would say, and completely antithetical to diplomacy. Of course, I'm speaking of Kaja Kallas. So there's no true good justification for the European position. There are some explanations that may be behind what we're seeing, but these are failed policies. That's the bottom line.
Yeah, there's I've thought about that as well. If the Europeans would go away from the anti-Russian position as the unifying element, and they would start to walk towards peace, I think that there would be too many dividing lines. They might actually end up causing a lot of divisions. But that being said, given that the war is being lost, then any deal tomorrow will be worse than today. The longer they postpone a peace, the worse it will be for the Europeans, I think. And also all the arguments that we're doing this for the Ukrainians, we're helping them. I mean, it comes into question when you see how all the Western media and politicians immediately will ignore all polling, which shows that the vast majority of Ukrainians want negotiations. But as this meeting now has been postponed or cancelled, the European leaders, if we can call them that, with Ukraine already has a 12-point plan being prepared. Again, this is not as a result of talks with Russia, because our leaders in Europe do not believe in talking to the other side. So these are unilateral terms, which is also a bit unique, given that the losing side usually do not get to dictate to the winning side. But on these 12 points, one of them is what you hinted towards, the legalization or the theft of Russian assets, or they say there can be a gradual unwinding of the sanctions if Russia agrees to use the assets we have taken to be used for reconstruction. So it's a way of having Russia consent to us taking their money. I mean, there's nothing there for Russia, though. I guess my question is, this is quite extraordinary but it's also consistent. For the past 35 years, indeed, EU strategies on Russia in the 90s, they're always quite unique, that they never had any input from Russia at all. How can you have this continuous agreement or proposals where there's no reference to any Russian security concerns at all? Nothing about NATO expansion or Ukraine neutrality.
Again, one of the European officials involved in this said in the press, I think it was reported in the Financial Times, that this is a repackaging of what has been said without anything new. Europe is simply perseverating. It's simply repeating the same points. The same with Zelensky, who rules by martial law against the overwhelming desire of his own country to stop this war at the negotiating table. So we're not seeing anything new. Maybe in terms of trying to rationalize this one more time, there was a view going into this provocation. It dates back to the 1990s, actually, when the United States laid out the plan to expand NATO to Ukraine and to Georgia, and for the European Union to expand to include these countries. Zbigniew Brzezinski in 1997 analyzed what Russia's response would be, and he wrote a book about this, The Grand Chessboard. And in his analysis, he said Russia would be extremely unhappy about all of this, but it could not resist this. The view was, in the end, if the West is strong and clear and perseveres, Russia will be defeated. And this may be also one of the implicit or explicit beliefs of these European leaders, that they somehow have Russia on the run, that it's about to collapse, it's about to crumble, the economy is about to fail, the battlefield situation is about to turn. All of this is delusional, And one of the delusions back in 1997 of Brzezinski, quite interesting because it's very explicit, and he was an analyst, and so he wrote down his assumptions and his predictions. He said that Russia would have no alternative because it would never turn to China, for example. A Russia-China alliance, he said, was out of the question. And he also said no one in the West would be so stupid as to make that happen. But here is Russia basically taking the viewpoint, we don't depend on following European diktats. We don't depend on Europe's goodwill. We don't even depend on the United States' goodwill, which is perhaps even more consequential. If Europe persists in this way, we will deal with the BRICS countries. We will deal with the Eurasian countries towards the east. China is our main economic partner. The leading member of people need the European Union to agree with us. And if the European Union persists in this one-sided, arrogant, and deaf approach, deaf in the sense that it has not listened to anything Russia has said since 1990, well, okay, we have alternatives. And I think that that also was and perhaps until very, very recently. One should also add Trump is a bumbling, not well-informed, not very bright person. And so there is no clear U.S. position or U.S. strategy. I think there is a desire by Trump to end this war. He's ready to listen more. But the U.S. is also very inconsistent, and the Europeans have found that by continuing their hard line, they bring Trump back into line. In other words, they've gotten this meeting in Budapest canceled just now. I think it is a European effect which affected the White House. Trump is not strong enough, clear thinking enough, strategic enough to lead. So he's very responsive to the European pressures, and maybe the Europeans feel we'll just keep after this. After all, it's the Ukrainians dying. Eventually, Russia will collapse under the weight of all of this. This is wrong. It's profoundly cynical. It is against what their own publics want. It's against what the Ukrainian people want. But after all, how much confidence do you have in Starmer, Merz, and Macron? Their own countrymen despise them. This is the point.
Yeah, there's an amazing speech given by Joe Biden back in '97 at the Atlantic Council, where he discusses NATO expansion, and he makes the point that the Russians have said if you decide to expand NATO, that would well, effectively be betrayal. It would break Western Russian relations, and his response was simply that, well, we're the only game in town, which is true, which was true in the '90s, and then he argues that the Russians told him that you know, if you do expand NATO, we're gonna have to start aligning more with China. And he starts to mock it. He says, well, go ahead, I told them, you know, while you're at it, why don't you go cooperate more with Iran? And the whole room bursts into laughter. And, you know, if you forward, 28 years, not so funny anymore. It's, but we mentioned this on this topic of peace through strength, that this is something that NATO has, not just the US, but NATO has obsessed with for quite some time. This idea that if if we're just powerful enough, this is the foundation of peace because we can dictate the terms. Yeah, I was wondering how well if it does relate to it, but how do you see?
I think that there's another point that one can add exactly in this regard, which is that perhaps another part of, maybe it's obvious, but then should be mentioned, therefore, that another part of the Macron, Merz, Starmer idea is not just that Russia will finally crumble if we persevere, but the idea that the Russophobia is our main political instrument for mobilizing public opinion in Europe to enable us to build a military that we don't have. In other words, we should use this as the opportunity. Maybe it is the opportunity to create the military and strategic autonomy of Europe. And so we have to exaggerate the Russia fear to bring our publics along. This may be a crude political tactic. We know Macron, he wants an autonomous Europe. By the way, so do I. I think it's the right approach. But maybe he thinks that to lie about it, to grossly exaggerate the threat from Russia is the way to bring it about rather than telling the truth. Well, Macron lies relentlessly. He's lied to me because he said privately to me, yes, NATO was the reason for this war, and then publicly exactly the opposite. And that kind of politics, well, it can work for a while, but his approval rating is the lowest of all of them, by some measures around 13% approval. And so, in other words, 87% disapproval. And I think the public senses that these politicians are not leveling with their citizens. They're telling fables for whatever reason. And it doesn't resonate.
And never let a good crisis go to waste. But well, yeah, my last question though is on the format of the peace agreement, because we see that this is that is from Boris Johnson to Marco Rubio. Everyone has defined this now as a proxy war. Recently, Trump even made the point that Zelensky is giving him some plans for an offensive they want, and he's considering whether or not he will approve it. So, we kind of move past the pretense here, but then the format for negotiations where Trump is the mediator, and I always have to make the point that it's not his war, he's a peace president. And I guess there's a positive attitude to, or a persona to encourage, even if it's profoundly flawed. But how long can this format continue, though? That is to pretend as if this is not a NATO war, because if you don't diagnose it correctly, how can you solve it? I still don't hear any references to stopping the NATO expansion, restoring Ukraine neutrality.
Exactly.
And you do need to recognize that NATO is the participant. I mean, we did start or trigger the war in 2014. So how long can this continue? At some point, Trump has to also sit down at the table, not as a mediator.
Well, there's no mediation. And it's not even a proxy war. It's a war. NATO is at war with Russia. And it's not just NATO equipment and NATO financing and NATO intelligence and NATO targeting. It's NATO personnel because very frequently you have American and European dead being sent back. We know that there are NATO personnel in Ukraine. There need to be with these weapon systems. This is not something that these that are managed by the Ukrainians. This is perfectly known. So this isn't even a proxy war. It's true that most of the deaths are Ukrainian deaths, and that's what makes it so convenient from the point of view of the warmongers in the United States and Europe. But this is a direct war, and a very dangerous one, because it's a war between two nuclear superpowers, the United States and Russia. And when Trump talks this way, that yes, maybe we'll have the Tomahawks, or maybe we'll entertain a new offensive, that's a war between the U.S. and Russia. If Russia were having some Caribbean nation lob missiles into the United States, things would not be so calm in the U.S. But what the U.S. does vis-a-vis Russia is absolutely extraordinary and profoundly dangerous. So how long can this go on? It can continue to kill Ukrainians in very large numbers. It could escalate into something absolutely horrifying, or it could actually end sensibly the way that it should. But for that, we have to understand one last point, which is that Trump is a very weak leader, even not really a leader. He falls prey to flattery, which is part of the idea of the European plan, so-called, is to put Trump on as chair of some peace board. Like Trump put himself in Gaza. This is almost like a comic book, but this is also the European flattery. It's the Secretary General of NATO calling Trump daddy. Is this the real world of adults that actually have nuclear weapons, or is this some horrifying comic strip? This is the situation. We have a very inconsequent, unknowledgeable, and mercurial and temperamental president of the United States who demands flattery and adulation. We have European leaders profoundly unpopular. We have a pretty clear way that peace could actually be achieved, which is that Ukraine would be neutral. There would be a territorial agreement reached. There would be, on the basis of neutrality, a demilitarized region, so that Ukraine, Europe, and Russia would all be safe from each other. And this would be the basis for peace from on the foundations of indivisible security. It's not hard to map this out, but it would take a bit of insight, knowledge, historical responsibility. And unfortunately, we don't have that in the Western countries right now anywhere. And so this is why we continue to not only endlessly circle around this and endlessly come up with absurd proposals, but why Ukraine continues to be such a devastating graveyard for Ukrainians day after day, week after week. And no Western leader other than Viktor Orban and Roberto Fico, and probably a growing number of Europeans in the coming months. Mr. Babic as new Prime Minister of the Czech Republic. Maybe they'll finally be able to have their voice heard within Europe to say enough is enough. This has gone on far too long for our good and for our safety.
My concern now is if this window opportunity for a peaceful agreement closes, it looks like the only alternative becomes a direct war, though, because we see now a few days ago, FSB, the Russian intelligence services, released this report that there was a British who was behind the attack on their nuclear deterrent. We see now very openly that it's the Western countries involved in the attacks on Russian refineries. And of course, with the Tomahawks, there was no pretense anymore. It was recognition they would be operated by Americans. So not a Ukrainian weapon, but the American attack on Russia. So we're getting very close, it seems, to full out direct war.
And I could say there's delusions in all of the main capitals, in Washington, in London, in Paris, in Berlin. But the most delusional of all actually is in London because the British Empire still exists in the minds of these people. And when you mentioned these British-inspired attacks on Russian nuclear facilities, this is the insanity that continues to grip the long-gone British Empire.
Well, I know you have a big day ahead of you in the Vatican, so I will thank you very much for taking the time, and have a great one. Thank you.
Great to see you. Thanks.
Celebrate our newest launch, Rev 7. I'm bringing you an amazing introductory offer, plus an exclusive overstock sale that you're not going to want to miss. Rev 7 is our premium energy drink that tastes great and gives you energy all day with no jitters and no crashes. That's because there's no sugar and no caffeine. I'm so sure you're going to love Rev 7 that for a limited time you can try our 3-pack absolutely free. Or check out our Percale bed sheets. I can't believe I'm even going to say this. Every color, every style, every size, only $29.88. So go to mypillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to save 20% on our Rev 7 12-packs or try our introductory 3-pack absolutely free. And our Percale bed sheets, all sizes, only $29.88, even the queens and kings. Inventory is extremely limited, so order now.
Pandemic, we can never be caught unprepared again. And so many Americans, when COVID hit, they had nothing in the house. Stores were shut down, and doctors' offices were shut down. And even if doctors prescribed drugs, hydroxychloroquine, ivermectin, pharmacists wouldn't fill the prescriptions. That was a nightmare.
Now the situation is much worse. We have these horrible supply chain problems. In our emergency medical kit at the Wellness Company, we have 8 prescription drugs that are all potentially life-saving.
Most people who died with COVID, they died in the hospital because they didn't receive early treatment.
Every American family should have one of these.
I can tell you the Wellness Company kit is the answer.
When Johnny comes marching home again, hurrah, hurrah, we'll give him a hearty welcome then, hurrah, hurrah. Oh, the men will cheer, the boys will shout, the ladies, they will all turn out and we'll all...
Welcome back to the SCIF. I'm on the ground here in Beirut, Lebanon. We'll be traveling to Montenegro and Serbia over the next few days as we continue to report on what's happening to Christianity, the faith, across the world. And so we'll have some good stuff coming up. Hope you enjoyed that with Jeffrey Sachs, a Columbia professor very knowledgeable, and it really ties into our next guest, Pete Blaber, who I'm going to bring in now, and we'll do the Ukraine SitRep. Pete, how you doing, my friend?
Good. Good to see you, Todd. Good to see you.
Good to see you, man. So, go ahead.
I didn't know you were going to Montenegro next either. That's an amazing place. So, so enjoy that part of your trip.
I will. We're making connections. You know, one of our big calling cards at CDM is we have people, sources on the ground, literally all over the world. So we got to constantly refresh those relationships. They're important because we get information before others do, like you have as well on the ground in Ukraine, and that's why I love having you on. A lot of stuff going on. Tell me about this 12-point plan that Europe wants to put in. They're going to tell the Russians how we're going to make peace. Is that it?
Yeah. Well, I'll pop it up in a minute unless you have it. But, you know, just to tie it back, so the Europeans have a 12-point plan they want Russia to accept now. But just going back to what we just heard from Jeffrey Sachs, who I agree with you, is always great to listen to because he's got such a historical foundation. And just listening to him say, you know, that he listed all the Western company leaders, and he's pretty harsh on President Trump. I think that's one of his political baggage he carries with him. But that's okay.
You just got to take it, you know.
Exactly.
Because he's got so much other good stuff.
He still gives him some credit, but he's pretty harsh on. He always has been, and you know, at times he deserves critique, as you and I have pointed out throughout this process. But what I started thinking about as he was talking about the lack of historical context, it seems to me, and I started thinking this at the last meeting where Zelensky went to the White House, and I thought, you know, if I could get to the White House, or a guy like Sachs, or, you know, McRaven, any of those guys could go to the White House, I could in 30 to 60 minutes with facts convince President Trump that, you know, we're on kind of like the wrong siding, oversiding with the wrong side, where we have no knowledge of how this war started, and that needs to be foundational knowledge for everything you do, because it was so egregious. And not just what happened there, but what happened afterwards was so egregious. And I feel like, you know, if there was a new forum, and maybe we need this, and our viewers can chime in, send us comments, their thoughts. If there was like a forum where you could debate, we could get someone from Russia would come in and just show the facts, because they have the intercepted communications between Victoria Nuland and Ambassador Pyatt. They know they have a timeline of events from 13, 14, 15, all the way to 22. But just see that and then compare it and listen to what the responses are. And, you know, that's what, when we go back to that 12-point plan by the EU, you know, they're clueless. And when you look at what they put up, you're just like, that makes no sense. And unfortunately, everything that's stated, and we have a few things from Root, you know, Mark Root said last week, Ukraine is not losing.
Yeah.
The front line is just moving in the wrong direction. And so it's one of the all-time classic quotes, war quotes. But what we pointed out 3 weeks ago is in full force right now, and that's this propaganda effort to say Russia is hurting, Russia is disintegrating internally, Russia is not winning on the battlefield, Ukraine is not losing, and let's get to a ceasefire immediately, because we suddenly have a sense of urgency around freezing the lines. And that's because of what's going on the ground. And it's pretty significant on the ground right now with these encirclements.
So one of the big things is, sorry, I'm getting accosted by some grifters here.
Yeah.
I lost my train of thought. So tell me again what you were talking about.
Yeah, we were talking about the the Europeans just putting out propaganda, and then unfortunately, and again we point this out all the time, the biggest killer of propaganda is facts, and the most in-your-face facts are empirical, things you can see, things that are physically present, and so we have these lies about the Russian economy, the Russian oil industry has been severely hampered, which is a joke. It was just explained by one of the Russian leaders the other day who was visiting the U.S. And he said the only thing hitting refineries in Russia does is raise the price of oil worldwide. And when the price of oil rises worldwide, we just sell less oil for more money and make the same bank. So you're not hurting us at all. You haven't hurt us at any point throughout this process. And I love that. It's just a fact. And, the Russian economy, as you know, because you've been over there and have relatives over there, it's doing amazing. You can't tell any difference between driving around in America right now and driving around in Russia, except it's a little safer or a lot safer over there than it is here. So, their lies are just ridiculous. And then on the battlefield, so you mentioned updates and guys on the ground, and I just got one. And so Pokrovsk is encircled. There's a 4-kilometer lane that's still open outside Pokrovsk that potentially about 5,000 Ukrainians might be able to E&E back out through. Definitely dismounted. Anything mounted right now is going to get destroyed. So that's Pokrovsk. The same thing's happening in Kupiansk. Kupiansk is completely encircled. It's got a larger escape route, about 6 to 10 kilometers, but it's over marshy river terrain, so very difficult to get through. And two reasons I bring this up. One is it's the empirical about, Russia's not winning. It's definitely why you're seeing Zelensky and the EU all but begging for this ceasefire with frozen lines, which
that was my point. Thanks for reminding me. I was going to bring that up. They're like, we got to have it. We're ready for a ceasefire. Let's do it right away.
Yeah, on the frozen lines.
Yeah, on frozen lines, because they know if this goes on any longer, they're going to be, in a real world of hurt. What's the big thing that's happening from this, though, Todd, is that the small unit frontline commanders have been recommending since at least July that they do a controlled repositioning, which is, in the military, we never say retreat. We always have some synonym, and that's a good one, especially in this case. In my opinion, Ukraine blew it on strategy from the beginning. They should have fought a strategic defense, which means it's a flex defense that moves constantly, adapts to overwhelming firepower and overwhelming resources, but they didn't do that. So these small unit commanders in July, they probably before that, but in full force in July, were recommending and all but begging that they get this reposition done as quickly as possible. Zelensky told Syrskyi in Kupiansk and Pokrovsk, you must hold in place at all costs. And that conversation has gone back and forth many, many times since July. So they've raised it until finally you got the, what a frustrated parent says to his kid, don't ask me again. What I said is final. And so these guys are basically trapped. They knew what the right thing to do was way back in July, which would have saved at least 10,000. I think there's over 10,000 between the two, but I like the low number. So 10,000 men. But it also is reflective of what we've been talking about,
disconnected hierarchies cannot make sensible decisions about the front line. They're clueless, they're senseless. And of course, this war is controlled from Wiesbaden, with now British generals and Ukrainian generals in Kyiv. No one on the front line has a say. It's the same authoritarian top-down stuff. And that's what happens. You can't make these flexible, on-the-fly decisions that need to be made to adapt on the battlefield when you're being commanded and controlled by a disconnected hierarchy. And so, once again, what's really killing Ukraine is this NATO, concept of disconnected chains of command, satellite communication, generals telling captains what to do on the battlefield. And that's the story in both those cities. Everyone's been saying this for a while, but they are both within days, at longest weeks, of collapsing. Kupiansk for sure. Pokrovsk, we'll see, might take a week or so, but it could happen today too, because they are encircled.
That's why Zelensky's all of a sudden ready for a ceasefire.
Right. Yeah. Right.
So we have a video from Mark Root at NATO. Let's play that.
No gains. They are coming at a huge price. Hundreds of thousands of Russians are dying for Putin's deluded aggression. Ukraine continues defending itself bravely, and our support to them is working. The truth is that Putin is running out of money, troops, and ideas. President Trump said it very well. They should stop where they are now.
Yeah, amazing. What do you say to that?
It's just they can't even make up good lies anymore. Putin is hurting. Well, I mean, what does that even mean? Has he got a headache? I don't think they're hurting, and everyone knows that. And the oil thing I just explained, as they have explained too. But this European desperation is scary. The Brits especially. I don't know if you have that Sun article, but the Sun in Britain published this article, and now what they're saying is even these empirical things, the two cities I mentioned to you being encircled, are just lies. They're lies by the Russian Ministry of Defense, and they hold no basis in fact. And so the only thing you can do is say they're lies. There's nothing in the article that backs that up. However, you can look at satellite photos and see where the Russians are at. They're in the middle. They now hold the train station in Pokrovsk, which is the center of the town. Here it is. So, and then they say even Russians are taking notice. I read the whole article. We'll save the viewers from it. There's nothing in there about Russians calling out their highest ranking general or Putin. But what he says in this meeting is a very reserved take on what's happening. That's why I said many analysts, including Ukrainian, say there's 20,000 trapped. But the Russian chain of command says that it's only 10,000, 5,000 in one and 5,500 in the other. So they were very measured in their description, but nothing that they said is new. It's been incrementally happening for at least 3 months, as I have already described. So calling it a lie is like, saying it's a lie that the sun came out this morning. You can look outside and prove it's wrong.
Yeah. What gets me, Pete, is the scale of all this. I mean, we're throwing around numbers like 10,000 men like it's nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's overwhelming. I mean, the scale of this is off the charts, and the death and destruction. I'm glad we're not seeing a lot of the footage. It's got to be horrific. I mean, that many people getting killed on a daily basis.
Yeah, that's why you almost have to look at it. I see it every day, and it is horrific. And that's, we've explained this, you and I, before. We're American veterans, and on this issue, the America is the influence. The veteran is the catalyst. We see other military personnel. We see what they're going through. We see these young men dying for no reason at all on both sides. And because we've been there, we can feel for them, and we can understand the horrific nature of this thing, and that it's not, no one should be flippant about it. Every day that goes by, another 1,500 young men die. So you're absolutely right to point it out. And, historians, I hope, are never go easy on these EU leaders or these people who continue to make up lies, our influencers here in the U.S., make up lies to keep the war going. And to look at what's happening on the battlefield right now, to try to lie so that you can keep the Ukrainians fighting for your own interests, it's unconscionable.
Yeah, it really is. On that note, there's still more mobilization going on, but this is a video of them fighting back, actually, that came out recently.
Оставьте человека! Оставьте человека, вы что делаете? Это вообще человек, оставьте! Оставьте человека, какое вы имеете право! Оставьте! Что вы делаете, ненормальные? Делайте человека! Делайте человека! Разве можно так? Конченый, сука! Долбоёб, ебаный! Что вы делаете, пидорасы, ебучие? Меня дитина в машине. Отпустите! Пидорасы ебучие! Пизда вам нахуй!
That's really hard to watch.
Yeah, but it's such a great indicator, Todd. They're on so many levels, and do you mind, can I just say a few things about it real quick?
Yeah, please go ahead. Yeah,
so just start with the conscriptors, the guys in the camouflage. You can see they are putting like a half-hearted effort into it. There were 5 giant guys there on one overweight slovenly guy, who's fighting for his life. But they're, it's not believe anymore in what they're doing. And clearly they've been told there will be no overt violence. Stop punching them, stop hitting them, and do not hit the civilians, because they're very, they're very reserved with the civilians. They allow the women to pound on their backs and pull on them, and the old men. And then this is becoming more common than uncommon. The guy gets away. And when passerbys rise up like that, it's not just, a chance thing. Like, for passerbys to rise up, there's really got to be internal belief system, a common internal belief system at play. And you can see that there. Again, we show these because as war historians, as far as we know, no country has ever won war that had to forcefully conscript its people. Russia had 360 so far this year. We're in October, 360,000 volunteers for Russia. And you just saw one forced conscript, what it takes to get that guy. And what that tells us, to all of our viewers, what that tells us, guys, is that 2 things. The message from this government has been totally ineffective. The message to the people about why they're fighting, and the belief system of these people in the purpose of this war is completely evaporated. It's not there. When you have both those things, you cannot win a war. Again, President Trump, we could probably just with that video show him and explain that to him and tell him This is why we've just got to walk away and begin the normalization process with Russia.
So you brought up a good point. This wasn't their relatives. It wasn't their wives. It was just people on the street who saw this guy getting press ganged, and they went crazy on the kidnappers. I mean, that's really, really interesting. And plus the guy, if they're having to pull off, you know, a 50-year-old fat guy to put on the front line, those aren't high crack soldiers, you know?
No.
So
no.
It's I still think this is a depopulation exercise, but go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, you could be. I believe my mind's open to just about anything because the desperation. I still believe one of the biggest catalysts is that the censorship industrial complex is centered in Kyiv. It's the censorship industrial complex for all globalists and all leftists worldwide. It's their hope to win elections. It's their hope to bend continue bending their false narrative about, you know, the world and how humans interact and what humans are. I laugh because I laugh at those comments, but that's what I believe it is. That's what I believe the desperation is. It's the common ground between all these EU leaders and most of the people who support the war fervently in the U.S. And but I'm open to anything because their desperation is so senseless, and you know, but it must be powerful. So whatever it is, it's driving some crazy behavior.
Well, you're right. I think it's all of the above. I think it's a variety of things. It's money. It's saving face. It's ancient hatred of Russia. It's just a lot of different things. But I do think the depopulation, because they want the resources. What better way to? And it's an attack on Christianity, which why we're here in Beirut. And you know, I'm meeting, and literally in 45 minutes, I'm meeting with the Council on Christians in Oriental Middle East, and because they want press on what's going on in country and around the Middle East. So I think this is, if you can kill all the Christians and then bring in third world migrants, it can be slaves, because Christians don't you know, bow to the government. They bow to something higher. So it's fascinating once you start looking at it. What else, Pete? Anything else that you want to talk about?
Yeah, no, I think that those are most of the key topics, but that's fascinating, and please keep that up. I'm glad you're doing it, and I know all the viewers are too. It's amazing endeavor, Todd. So thanks.
All right, man. We'll talk to you next time. Thanks for coming on today. I really appreciate it.
Yep, sounds good. Take care.
All right.
Head up, eyes open, man.
Yeah, man. Ciao. All right, so we're going to end the show here because I've got to go to a meeting. So really appreciate you joining us today. And we'll be back tomorrow at 10 a.m. Monday through Friday, 10 to noon on the SCIF. And we'll have the Georgia show tomorrow evening as well. Not sure I'm going to make that because that's way ahead. And we're going to be, it's going to be like 4 a.m. or something. So probably be Bill Quinn tomorrow night. But thank you. Please support our sponsors, and we'll see you tomorrow. Thank you.